Amina walked in without knocking. She closed the door too late. She did not mean to see him like that. But from that moment on, everything about him became harder to ignore. The way he filled a room. The way silence followed him. The way her thoughts lingered where they never had before. He was still her boss, but her mind no longer treated him like one. Amina was a black African woman living far from home. She had arrived in South Korea years earlier with a suitcase, a quiet determination, and the belief that if she worked hard enough, she could build a life that felt stable, even if it never felt familiar. She worked as a domestic cleaner, moving from house to house, apartment to apartment, learning how to make herself small in spaces that were never designed for her. The house she cleaned now was different from the others. It was large, quiet, and hidden behind tall iron gates that never seemed to open fully. Trees lined the driveway, thick enough to block the view from the street. Stone walls surrounded the property, cold and permanent. Men stood outside the gates day and night. They did not smile, they did not talk, and they did not look away when someone passed. They watched everything without appearing to watch anything at all. Amina did not ask who they were. She did not ask what they did. She had learned that curiosity could be dangerous in a foreign place. The man who owned the house was Minho Park. People in the city whispered his name when they thought no one else was listening. Shopkeepers lowered their voices when his car passed. Neighbors avoided eye contact when he walked by. No one ever explained what he did for a living. They did not have to. His presence carried its own explanation. To Amina, he was simply her employer. At least, that was how she framed him in her mind. He paid well. He spoke little. He expected things to be done properly and on time. He never raised his voice. He never complained. He never praised either. She cleaned his floors, washed his dishes, dusted rooms that felt more like museum displays than living spaces. She moved through the house quietly, careful not to disturb anything that felt expensive or dangerous. She had been hired to clean, not to be noticed, and for a long time, she was not. That was the rule she lived by. Invisibility was protection. Men like Minho Park did not look at women like her, and even if they did, it was never in a way that changed anything. She told herself that every day. It kept her grounded. It kept her safe. Until the day she opened the wrong door. It had been an ordinary afternoon. The kind that blended into every other day. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. Amina carried fresh linens down the hallway, mentally counting the rooms she had left to finish. She reached a door she believed was empty. She did not knock. She turned the handle and stepped inside. Time slowed. Minho Park stood in the room, his back to the door, caught in a moment that was never meant to be shared. He had not heard her enter. The room felt suspended, as if the air itself had frozen. Amina realized instantly that she should close the door. She realized it a second too late. By the time she stepped back and shut it, her heart was already racing. Her hands trembled around the folded sheets. She stood in the hallway, breath shallow, pulse loud in her ears, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She did not mean to see him like that. She did not want to remember it. But her mind had already taken hold of the moment and refused to let it go. It was not simply what she had seen. It was the effect it had on her. Something inside her shifted, quietly but completely, like a line crossed without permission. After that day, Amina tried to return to normal. She told herself it was an accident. A mistake. A moment that would lose its power if she refused to dwell on it. She focused on her work, scrubbing surfaces until they shone, rearranging items that had not moved in months, keeping her eyes down whenever she heard footsteps approaching. But forgetting proved harder than she expected. She became aware of Minho Park in ways that unsettled her. The sound of his footsteps echoed differently now, heavy and deliberate. His presence lingered even when he was not in the room, like a shadow that followed her from one space to another. She noticed how much space he occupied without effort, how rooms seemed to adjust themselves around him. She noticed how people reacted to him. How guards straightened when he passed. How conversations stopped mid-sentence. How silence arrived before he did. And worst of all, she noticed herself noticing. She hated it. She hated the direction her thoughts drifted, The way her mind returned to that brief, accidental moment without her consent. She hated that she replayed it not for detail, but for understanding. As if knowing why it affected her so deeply might give her control over it. He was her boss. He was powerful. If the rumors were true, he was dangerous. And she was just the cleaner. That was the reality she clung to, the truth she repeated whenever her thoughts betrayed her. Men like him did not look at women like her. She was invisible. She had always been invisible. And yet, something had changed. She began noticing small details she had ignored before. The way his voice lowered late at night when the house was quiet. The way he paused before speaking, as if choosing his words carefully. The way his gaze sometimes lingered, not openly, but just long enough to make her wonder if she imagined it. And then there was the distance. In a house that large, with narrow hallways and tight corners, accidental touches were unavoidable. Or they should have been. But with Minho Park, they never happened. He adjusted his path without drawing attention to it. He stepped aside before she reached him. He always maintained space, as if he was acutely aware of where she stood at every moment. She told herself it was respect. That was the most reasonable explanation. But respect felt intentional. And intention made her uneasy. At night, when Amina lay in bed, she found her thoughts drifting despite her efforts. Not to what she had seen, but to how it had made her feel. To the sudden awareness of him as more than an employer. To the discomfort of wanting something she had no right to want. Her mind had changed him into something forbidden. Someone her body reacted to before her logic could intervene. And that knowledge sharpened everything around her, making ordinary moments feel charged, dangerous, alive. Then the jealousy came. It arrived quietly, disguised as confusion. One evening, a woman came to the house. She was confident, well-dressed, and comfortable in a way that suggested familiarity. She spoke Korean fluently, her laughter soft and controlled. She moved through the space as if she belonged there. Amina watched from the hallway, cloth in hand, pretending to clean. Her chest tightened without warning. She did not understand why. She told herself she had no reason to care. No right to feel anything at all. But jealousy does not wait for permission. The woman stood close to Minho. They spoke in low voices. They shared looks Amina could not read. The sight unsettled her more than she expected. She compared herself without meaning to, measuring the difference between them and finding herself lacking in every way she could think of. The woman looked like she belonged in his world. Amina looked like someone who cleaned it. That night, she finished her work early. She left the house with a weight in her chest she could not name. 4 days afterward, she avoided the rooms Minho frequented. She avoided looking at him. She avoided thinking about the woman, though the image lingered. Questions followed her everywhere. Why did he never bring women to the house before? Why did seeing one now bother her so deeply? Why did it feel like she had lost something she never possessed? What Amina did not know was that Minho Park had noticed her long before she noticed him. Not because she tried to stand out, but because she did not. He noticed the way she moved quietly, almost apologetically, through his house. He noticed how she never asked questions, never lingered, never crossed boundaries that others might have tested. He noticed how she treated his space with care, not curiosity. How she seemed determined to leave no trace of herself behind. After the day she opened the wrong door, he noticed something else. The way she avoided him. The way her posture stiffened when he stood nearby. The way her eyes no longer met his. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself it was respect. The truth was harder to face. Minho Park had power over everything in his life. Over people. Over outcomes. Over situations that would have overwhelmed others. But there was one thing he refused to touch. One line he would not cross. And that restraint cost him more than anyone could see. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken tension. Amina moved through the house as she always had, quietly and efficiently, but something in her awareness had sharpened. Every sound felt amplified. Every glance felt loaded. She told herself she was imagining it, that nothing had changed except her own thoughts, but the house no longer felt neutral. It felt observant, as though it held secrets it was waiting to reveal. Minho Park noticed the shift immediately. He noticed how Amina altered her routines, how she avoided certain rooms, how she timed her movements to avoid crossing paths with him. He noticed the restraint in her body, the way she kept her hands close to herself, the way her shoulders tightened when he spoke nearby. He recognized the look in her eyes because it mirrored something he had been carrying for far longer than he cared to admit. The woman Amina had seen returned a few days later. This time, the meeting was longer. Voices carried through the hallway, low and serious. Amina worked nearby, her attention divided despite her efforts. The jealousy returned, sharper now, edged with something close to resignation. She told herself it was foolish. She told herself she was projecting meaning where none existed. When the meeting ended, the woman left without ceremony. No lingering touches. No private smiles. No gestures that suggested intimacy. Only professionalism. Only distance. Later that evening, Amina overheard a fragment of conversation between two guards. The woman was a business partner. A negotiation. Nothing more. Relief washed over her before she could stop it. It was followed quickly by confusion. If that woman was not the reason Minho kept his distance, then what was? And why did the knowledge change the way Amina felt so immediately? That night, Minho stayed in his office long after the house had settled into silence. He stared at documents without reading them, his thoughts circling the same truth he had been avoiding. He had noticed Amina from the beginning. Not because she was loud or demanding, but because she was careful. Because she existed in his space without trying to claim it. Because she moved as though she understood danger instinctively. He admired that about her. More than he should have. After the accident, he had doubled his restraint. He had told himself it was necessary. That she deserved safety, not confusion. That his world was not one she should be drawn into. Desire, in his life, had always come with consequences. He refused to let her be one of them. Days passed. The tension remained. One evening, long after the guards had settled into their routines, Minho found Amina in the hallway. She was gathering cleaning supplies, her movements precise, her expression composed. She did not expect to see him there. The surprise showed before she could mask it. He stopped a few steps away. He always did. The silence stretched between them, heavy but controlled. "You should rest," he said calmly. Amina nodded, though she had not been tired until that moment. She turned to leave, then stopped. The words escaped before she could reconsider. "I thought I was invisible to you." The sentence hung between them, fragile and exposed. Minho did not answer immediately. He studied her face, the careful way she stood, the courage it had taken to speak at all. "You were the only person I saw," he said finally. Amina looked up. The distance she was used to seeing in his eyes was gone. In its place was restraint, deliberate and unmistakable. "I did not know how to cross that line without disrespecting you," he continued. "So I chose not to." Her breath caught. "So you stayed away," she said quietly. "Yes." The admission settled into the space between them. There was no movement toward each other. No touch. Only awareness. Only understanding. They stood there, close enough to feel the weight of everything they were not doing. For the first time, the distance felt chosen rather than imposed. Minho stepped back first. He always did. Nothing happened that night. And yet, everything changed. They did not touch. They did not promise anything. They did not speak again about what had been said. But the silence between them shifted. It softened. It became honest. Amina returned to her work with a different kind of calm. The desire had not disappeared, but it no longer felt like a secret she carried alone. It was acknowledged. Contained. Respected. Minho resumed his routines, his authority intact, his restraint unbroken. But the house felt different now. Less empty. Less guarded. As though something essential had finally been named. Amina understood then that the most dangerous thing about Minho Park was not what he could do. It was what he refused to do. And in that refusal, she found something unexpectedly powerful. Something that did not need to be acted on to be real. If you stayed until the end and this story made you feel something, please like this video to support the channel. Share it with someone who enjoys slow burn stories filled with tension and restraint. Comment below and tell us where you are watching from. And do not forget to subscribe to Afrosiora Chronicles for more stories where emotion speaks louder than action.